All right, I'm recording this session. You all as participants should receive a notification of this being recorded. And if you don't want to be recorded, that is fine. You can just jump right out of here. We are going to just record the first hour of this 2-hour session. And then I'll turn it off for the breakout rooms and whole group discussion. But the Appalachian Studies Association did want to make this available to folks who aren't able to be here today. And I had lots of people tell me that they weren't able to join us. So we'll make this recording available through the Appalachian Studies Association social media and through their website. So welcome everyone, and happy International Mountain Day. In 2003, the United Nations declared December the 11th International Mountain Day. And the UN encourages the international community to organize events at all levels on this day to highlight the importance of sustainable mountain development. This year's theme, they have a theme every year, and this year's theme is sustainable mountain tourism, sustainable development in the mountain tourism area. We are taking a little bit of a license today. We are not going to be focusing on sustainable mountain development, although that is a huge issue and one that many of us in the region do work on. But we today are going to be celebrating Appalachia's historic and current connections with other mountain regions around the world. We're also hoping to facilitate more such conversations and partnerships in the future, and we do hope to make this an annual event. I've pasted, and I'm going to do it again, the link to the program for today in the chat. Give me just a second to get back in there. All right, so if you are at a computer, you might want to navigate over to that URL. We do have links to information about our presenters and some other things in there, so take a look at that. Please do feel free to share greetings from your mountains in the chat. We already had a couple people do that. I know we have at least one person from Western Pennsylvania with us, so please do make use of that chat function if you feel led. This event is sponsored by the International Connections Committee of the Appalachian Studies Association. My name is Catherine Ledford, and I'm the chair of the committee, and I'm also past president of the association. A few announcements before we get started. This first hour is going to be presentations about historic and current connections between Appalachia and other mountain regions around the world. Then during the second hour, we're going to have discussion in breakout rooms, and then we will return. That'll take about 30 minutes, and then for the final 30 minutes, we'll come back together for a whole group conversation. You are welcome to stay as long as you like. I've heard from several folks who were only able to be here for the first hour of presentations, and then they have to scoot on to do other things on this Saturday. But I just wanted to let you know that I will be following up with an email to all of you, giving you the opportunity to opt into a mailing list for invitations to future events and networking opportunities sponsored by the International Connections Committee and the Appalachian Studies Association. So speaking of our association, please consider joining if you are not a member of the Appalachian Studies Association, or renewing your membership if you are. COVID permitting, we will gather at West Virginia University in March for the 45th annual Appalachian Studies Conference. We have our fingers crossed that COVID is going to cooperate and we'll be able to join each other, gather with each other in person. But there is an opportunity, an option for going online in April. You can find out more about that. I'm going to stop my screen share for just a second and paste into the chat the link to the Appalachian Studies Association. If I can get my computer here to cooperate, bear with me for just a second. I want to copy and put that over in the chat. Oops, hold on. This has taken all my skills, people, all my Zoom skills. So in the chat, okay. So I've just, oops, that's the program link. I copied the wrong thing. Bear with me just a second. I do want to get you all a link to the Appalachian Studies Association. There it is. Just a second. Well, now I'm lost on my own screen. Hold on. There we go. Can't get back to the chat. Oh, here we go. Sorry. You know, I've taught on Zoom for a year and a half now, but when you've got people watching you, it gets nerve-wracking. So here we go. Now, that's what I wanted to do. So there's a link to our Appalachian Studies Association. I hope you will go to it. And please be aware that the association is going through a transition to a new web page. I'm very excited. So some of the links in there and some of the look of it may be a little messed up right now. We are in the process of transitioning to a new design for our web page, but that'll get you to the right place. I also want to, for those of you who are close to Boone, North Carolina, I do want to mention that the Banff Mountain Film Festival World Tour is hosted here on our campus every March. There are some tickets still available for that. So if you're interested, I do hope you will go to the, just Google around and find the Banff Mountain Film Festival World Tour here at Appalachian State University if you're in our Boone area. And if you're not, that World Tour Festival, of films goes around the world. So find a location near you, take advantage of getting to see that. I want to thank our presenters for taking time to be with us today and to share their knowledge. I am happy and delighted to say that this hour will just scratch the surface of the connections between Appalachia and other global mountains. There are many other academics and community members in our Appalachian region doing international mountain work. I look forward to the Appalachian Studies Association's International Connections Committee facilitating more such opportunities to meet and network in the future. So let's turn our attention to presentations. Our presenters are going to introduce themselves. They're in pairs, talking about their particular areas of engagement. Our first presenters are Christian Quindler and Ben Robbins from the University of Innsbruck. And I don't know if they're going to be sharing a screen with us, but everyone should have all our presenters should have the option of sharing their screens. All right.
Oh, wonderful. Am I up already?
All right. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's good afternoon for you. Good evening for us here. Good afternoon, Appalachia. Greetings, mountaineers. Thank you very much, Catherine, for inviting us to celebrate Mountain Day with you. It's very exciting to be back in Boone, even if it's just via Zoom. Yeah, Christian Quendler. I'm currently chairing the Department of American Studies at the University of Innsbruck here in Austria. I'm here with Dr. Benjamin Robbins, who is a postdoc researcher and about to direct a 4-year project on network narrative of queer exile literature in the 20th century. And why are we here? Well, it's thanks to the support of the amazing Sandy Bellard. Ben and I had the opportunity to guest edit a special issue of the Appalachian Journal that brings together national and transnational perspectives. You can look out for this copy. I think it's hot off the press. It should arrive next week, I've heard. This directional engagement will also be the focus of our mini presentation today. Ben will focus on what perhaps European perspectives can contribute to studying Appalachia, and I will start out by addressing a few points of how Appalachia has enriched my perspective on mountain studies. Much of the work I do is in the field of film studies, and I'm currently conducting a research project on mountain cinema and the classical German Berg film of the 1920s and 30s. That's often the first thing that comes to mind. And in fact, it's also what has dominated much of the research on mountain cinema. And my aim was and is to go beyond this legacy and explore other mountain film traditions before and after the Weimar cinema. And I should say that I conceived of this project while I was visiting Appalachian State University as a Fulbright professor in 2018. And the Center of Appalachian Studies and the work that has been done there was extremely helpful. I went into the archive and revisited the work of Jerry Williamson on Appalachian film history. And it helped me to discover things about European mountain drama that I haven't been aware of and that has been largely ignored. So typically we think of comparative mountain studies as helping us to understand differences that exist between different mountain cultures. But in this case, it really helped me to discover something like a forgotten perspective on European mountain film traditions. And I should also say, of course, I had a really great introduction to Appalachian studies. Catherine took us on a 5-day field trip that culminated in participating at the Appalachian Studies Conference in Asheville, I believe, in 2019. And I want to thank Mark Nuns and the entire faculty and staff of the Interdisciplinary Studies Department. I really had a great time there, and my family and I felt truly at home. But before I pass on the screen to Ben, I want to address another important regard of why Appalachia matters for Tyrolean Alps, perhaps. And I think this is a particularly important one, and I'm sure that Jean Williams and Tom Hansel will also address this, right? Tyrol is perhaps one of the densest, has one of the densest tourist infrastructure worldwide. And it's a fact that we all became painfully aware during the pandemic when Ischgl became a global hub, right? And although the tourism industry has a better image than, let's say, the mining industry, its environmental consequences are also devastating. So if Appalachia has learned from Wales or is engaging in a discussion about it, Tyrol may also be well advised in listening into this conversation. And I think after a global warming will give après-ski a meaning that will resonate deeply with the title of Tom Hansel's book, After Co, right? After skiing may give us new challenges and new stakes of examining the future of community development. I think that there are some parallels that are immediately obvious that we should start thinking about. And I think I should stop here, but with this outlook, I pass on the screen to Ben, who will sort of reverse the perspective and also talk about our special issue. Right.
Thank you, Christian. And thank you very much, Catherine, for the invitation to present. So I'm currently in Berlin, so good evening from Berlin. We don't have mountains here, of course, it's very flat. But I was just in the US, in the Rocky Mountains. I went on a hike and I posted some pictures. A friend on Instagram said, it looks just like Tyrol. So I think these mountains can sometimes be the site of transnational identifications, and that's what we really wanted to explore in this issue. So I'll talk to you a bit more about the concepts we addressed in the special issue. So at the Mediating Mountains conference that Christian mentioned at the end of 2019, we brought together American and European scholars of Appalachia. And this led to the creation of the special issue of the Appalachian Journal at the invitation of the journal editor, Sandy Ballard, who's here this evening or this afternoon. So nice to see you. And thank you very much again for the opportunity to edit the special issue. And the issue features an outstanding collection of articles developed from presentations at that conference. And we wanted to focus on the perspectives that Europeans can bring to Appalachia, as well as the conversations that can be sparked between European and American scholars of Appalachia. And the issue is titled Transnational Perspectives, Attachment and Appropriation in Our Appalachia, so our in inverted commas. inverted quotation marks. And we chose these two concepts of attachment and appropriation as the thematic through lines for the journal. And the introduction that Christian and I wrote highlights how attachment to, first of all, attachment to Appalachia can be both local and global. For example, Christian discusses how one can encounter different Appalachias in cinema that are reimagined through European landscapes. And these expressions of attachment to Appalachia often communicate through familiar iconography and indeed stereotypes, and therefore appropriation is also crucial to these processes of reimagining Appalachia in different contexts and from different perspectives. In the introduction, we use 2 case studies on popular icons to illustrate these core concepts. And the figures we chose were Buster Keaton and Dolly Parton. And we show how both these figures challenge the uses of Appalachian stereotypes through playful exchanges of regional, national, and transnational perspectives. And the contributors to the issue all engage with these core themes in relation to Appalachia from national and transnational perspectives. So we have contributors in the issue from Austria, France, Germany, and the US. So just to mention a couple of contributions. So Katharina Fackler from the University of Bonn in Germany focuses on the collaborative visual media project looking at Appalachia in her article to show how viewing the region from a diversity of perspectives, so international perspectives, can help overcome limiting stereotypes about the region. And Evangelia Kindiger from the Humboldt University of Berlin, in her article, focuses on Anne Pancake's 2007 novel, Strange as This Weather Has Been, which is a text that challenges the violence of mountaintop removal mining. However, Kindiger argues that more intersectional and transnational accounts of Appalachian lives are still needed. So the work that's done in that novel needs to go a bit further to incorporate these more diverse perspectives. But that's just to give you a little overview of the kind of core themes of the issue, as well as a couple of contributions. But we particularly fostered dialogue between European and American scholars through the roundtable section of the issue. And we asked all the contributors to discuss, we had a prompting question, which was asking them what new forms and strategies of cultural self-expression have emerged from struggles over representations of Appalachia. So this links back to the idea of our Appalachia in the issue's title. So who has a right to represent or tell stories about that region? And everyone offered fascinating perspectives in the roundtable on the need for more diverse representations of Appalachia that foster dialogue between communities, traditions, and nations, which the special issue as a whole also seeks to do. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, both Ben and Christian. We really appreciate that. So our next presenters are going to talk to us about Carpathia.
So even though I am alphabetically first, I'm going to let Don Davis go first because he is the groundbreaker here, and then I will follow after Don. Is that okay, Don?
Sure. Can everyone hear me? Everyone hear me? Thanks, Teresa. Thank you so much. I'm going to try to share my screen, although maybe I'll do that in just a second. First, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Don Davis. I'm an independent scholar who worked within the University System of Georgia for about 18 years, then later came back and did some more teaching with them online. After leaving the University System of Georgia, I taught for Virginia Tech. I also taught for the University of District Columbia in Washington, DC, and did a couple of Fulbrights, one Fulbright one Fulbright, but two in two different segments in Western Ukraine. So today I'm speaking to you from Islamabad, Pakistan, and in the Himalayan foothills called Margala Hills. It's getting a little chilly here, but it is somewhat of a tropical environment, and there's certainly a lot of interesting things going on in Pakistan these days. But I'm here tonight, today your time, to talk mostly about the Carpathians. I first experienced the Carpathians when I visited there in the late 1990s as a guest of the Appalachian historian David Kimbrough. I was on faculty leave at the time. He asked me to come along with him. He had met a Fulbrighter from Romania, and we went from Bucharest to Cluj-Napoca in the heart of the Carpathians. And immediately I fell in love with the Carpathians and knew I wanted to do some more work there in the future. Later, I returned to the Carpathians, trying to develop a relationship between Kalush, Ukraine, which is the carpet capital of Ukraine, and Dalton, Georgia, which is some folks consider the carpet capital of the world, at least in broadloom carpet. That didn't really work out, but because of that interest in my travel there, we decided that we did have some mutual concerns, and that involved our mountains and our mountain ranges. So in 2008, I brought a delegation over from the United States to Western Ukraine. And then in 2013, we had our first official International Appalachian Carpathian Conference. And then every 2 years, we would continue to do that. We've had 2 in Ukraine, 2 in Romania. Teresa will talk a little bit about the last one, I think, and some of her more recent work. In terms of what we do, let me try to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
No, Don. Oh, now we can.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, so just to sum up, the
No,
Appalachian.
oh, sorry. I'm sorry. We've lost it again.
Okay. How about now?
Nope. We saw it
Okay,
just
but
a
you can
second.
hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear and see your video, but we can't see your screen.
Okay,
It flashed
Well, I'll
on
just-
for just a second, but then it disappeared.
okay. Well, just to sum up, the Appalachian Carpathian International Conference conferences have been designed to promote both institutional and scholarly exchanges between individuals working in the Appalachian and Carpathian mountain regions. We've done this by comparing and contrasting our scholarly research, our community histories, social problems, agricultural practices, food traditions, literatures, and folk cultures. The participants have included academics and scholars, nonprofit administrators, community activists, and university students. Since 2008, approximately 80 individuals from the Appalachians have visited the Carpathian Mountains of Ukraine and Romania, and about half that many individuals have traveled from the Carpathians to the United States. The international conference has also resulted in numerous Fulbright grants and fellowships, including awards in both Ukraine, Romania, and the United States. And I wanted to share with you another slide, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen, which would basically just show you a map of the Carpathians and give you some idea where the various conferences have been held since 2013. So we started off in Ukraine, then we moved down to Romania, went back to Ukraine, and then back again down in Romania. Unfortunately, the 2021 conference had to be canceled because of COVID, and we're now looking at possibly having a conference in 2022, or if that one gets canceled, in 2023. So I think I've used up my 5 minutes, so I'll turn it over to Teresa.
Thanks, Don. I'm going to try to share my screen. Can y'all see that?
Yes,
Yes,
we can. We can,
All
Teresa.
right. Okay. So As a result of the 2015 conference, which was the first time that I learned about the Appalachian Carpathian Mountain Conference, thanks to Don Davis, and my first trip to Romania, never even thought about Eastern Europe, and consequently fell in love with Eastern Europe and primarily Romania. As a result of that, in 2000, I'm going to go in a chronological order. In 2016, because of my relationships with primarily Doctors Georgetta Marcus and Christian Prala, who teach in the Faculty of Letters at Transylvania University of Brasov, my university, Radford University, which I should say I'm the director of Appalachian Studies. I didn't introduce myself, but I'm the director of Appalachian Studies. We entered into an Erasmus Plus agreement. The Erasmus agreement is between EU institutions, the Plus obviously outside of the EU, and it's a faculty student exchange. Here again, going along chronologically, in March of 2017, I brought Tom Hansel and I hosted Gabriel Amza, who is from Timișoara. He's a documentary photographer who we first met at the 2015 conference in Romania. He did a documentary photographic spread of the Jiu Valley, which is the coal mining region of Romania. And you can see some of his images here that he actually displayed at the 2015 conference. This is us at the 2017 conference. He displayed some of his photographs with Roger May, who is an Appalachian photographer from West Virginia. This is Gabe. I took him up to Black Mountain on the border of Virginia and Kentucky. It was the first time that he had ever seen mountaintop removal before. In May 2017, as a result of the Erasmus Plus agreement, I did a week-long guest lecture at Transylvania University, and you can see me teaching here. This was the first time that I traveled to the Jiu Valley. So Gabe and I met. It was quite the adventure, I will say, because I was solo for a ways on this bus and then got dropped off in the middle of a city. Well, it wasn't even a city, it was a town. I was afraid I wasn't going to connect with Gabe, but we did. And so we visited the Petrila mine here, which is the oldest coal mine in Romania and the deepest, by the way. This was the first time that I met Jan Barbu, who is a catalyst change agent in Petrila and the Jiu Valley. We also visited Lupin and Vulcan. Also, if you look here, these areas up here, this is the Jiu Valley. And just like in Appalachia, there are coal mining communities sprinkled along the valley. And this is looking up where we actually held our 2019 conference field trip. So, as a result of my trip to the Jiu Valley with Gabe in 2017, in 2018, November, I came back to Romania and drove Georgetta, Christian, and me to the Jiu Valley to scout out our field trip portion of the 2019 conference, which is where we held it. The main conference was at Transylvania University in Brasov. Here you can see the main committee members here, Don here, and Barbu and Adrian Lakatouche, who's the Dean of the Faculty of Letters, Georgetta, Christian, Gabe, I said Barbu. Anyway, our keynote speaker was Dr. David Kadekel, who had been doing research in the Jiu Valley, as well as Fagarash, since the 1970s, so during communist times. He was a doctoral student, and so incredible research stories. You can see Don here. He was talking about his photography exhibit from Romania. My friend Jeff Mann from Virginia Tech, who gave a poetry reading, the very arresting image of the poster from the conference. And so I am actually speaking to you all really quickly because I know for time, but I'm speaking to you all from Brașov, Romania, because I was very fortunate, as Dawn said, several people have been able to get Fulbrights, and I am a Fulbright scholar this semester for the fall, teaching Appalachian literature, and then I am teaching Anne's novel, Strange as This Weather Has Been, and she is actually joining us from West Virginia via Zoom on Tuesday night to talk to my students and some other students at graduate and undergrad at Transylvania University. I also had Diane Gillum. I taught her poetry collection, Kettle Bottom, and she spoke with us back in November. The wonders of Zoom, as we're testifying right now. So I am teaching Appalachian literature with a Cole focus. And I'm also conducting research in the Jiu Valley. And you can see, because of COVID, we have been conducting, and I'll explain this, we've been conducting interviews via Zoom right now. I'm hoping to go back to the Jiu Valley in January, but my doctoral student, Yulia Salka, right here, she studied with me at Radford University on an Erasmus Plus agreement in spring of 2019 as a master's student. Now she is a doctoral student at Transylvania University, and I am her co-advisor for her dissertation. So this is the beauty of collaboration. And you can see her here interviewing Barbu. She also interviewed Catalin, who was a former coal miner in the Jiu Valley. And my research is looking at comparing the Jiu Valley and Central Appalachia as both honor the industrial heritage, but transition to a post-coal economy. And finally, as Dawn alluded to, Jetta and Christy and I are in the process of planning the 22 conference. These are the dates. We are tentatively titling it Body, Labor, and Protest, to not only include industrial labor, but also agricultural. You can see this scene from the 1987 factory strike, Stegel-Rashu factory strike in Brașov, which was a catalyst for the 1989 revolution that overthrew Ceausescu. But we're going to be talking about this quite a bit and have people talk about their role in this. But then we are going back to Magara, which is where we went for our field trip in 2015, which is, as you can see, is a beautiful location. So I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you, Teresa and Dawn, both very much. We turn our attention next to Wales with Tom Hansel and Sean Williams.
Well, thank you, Catherine, and it's good to be here. I was actually just putting the Appalachia Carpathian Conference in my planner while we were talking. So, and I just want to say, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Tom Hansel. I'm with the Center for Appalachian Studies at Appalachian State University, and I'm just honored to be part of such I think, a strong international community. I mean, I know besides the great group of presenters here, there's actually a number of people I've seen their names and faces on the screen that I know do great international work. And so hopefully we can hear more about that in the breakout sessions too.
Tom, could I interrupt for just a second? If those of you who aren't keeping an eye on the chat, Jane McMorrin over at ETSU has just put in the chat a link to another conference opportunity. So sorry to interrupt you. Thanks.
No, that's exactly the kind of exchange I was talking about and the kind of thing I hope will grow out of this. So I appreciate that. So I'm going to introduce Sean Williams, who is the head of special collections and the librarian at the South Wales Miners Library at Swansea University in Swansea, Wales. And then I'm going to try to share my screen while we talk, and we've kind of put together a joint presentation. So Sean, why don't you begin, and I'm going to work on sharing my screen.
Oh, great. Oh, thank you, Tom. And well, good evening from Swansea. I know it's good afternoon to you in Boone. I'm so delighted to be able to join you, and thank you ever so much for inviting me. And it's great to see so many old friends. But I'm going to talk a little bit about our exchange from a Welsh experience, and I'm going to begin by giving some context and a brief description of the South Wales Coalfield, the South Wales Miners Library, so you can visualise what and where I'm talking about. So the South Wales Coalfield, which is the pink area on the map, covers about 1,000 square miles, and the areas that I will be mentioning are Swansea, which is a city on the coast, and the Dillais Valley, which is in the bit in red on the left. So the 19th century saw an increase in demand for coal in the UK, which led to the rapid sinking of coal mines or pits throughout the coalfield, and with them, the development of communities. Houses were built along with other social and cultural facilities. And Tom, if you could put the next slide on, there we go. And this is an example of one such coal mining community which sprang up with its Miners Institute and its chapel. Until the mid-1950s, the coal industry maintained a steady level of production and employment. But from the 1960s onwards, there were pit closures. And the last deep coal mine in South Wales closed in 2008, although there are still some open cast mining activities today. Next slide. So the South Wales Miners Library was established by Swansea University in 1973 as the result of a research project funded by the Social Sciences Research Council. And we house research collections relating to the cultural, political, educational and social history of industrial South Wales. And our holdings include Miners Institute libraries, posters, pamphlets, banners, and a large collection of oral and video histories. It also has a remit to support part-time adult learning at the university and in the community. When the library opened, it quickly became a focal point for research and was widely used by readers within and outside the university. And the next slide, please, Tom. One such reader was Helen Lewis from the University of Virginia, she was actually based in the library for a year in 1976, there she is, and her work focused on a comparative study of Appalachian and South Wales miners. Helen worked with John Gaventa and Richard Greatrex on the next slide, who had first visited the library in 1974. And with the support of, and with the contacts of Howell Francis, who was then the tutor librarian at the Miners Library, John and Richard videoed miners during the 1974 UK miners' strike. And as Richard has since said, John had this crazy idea to swap information between South Wales and Appalachia and talked about cultural exchange and thought the idea would catch on. Turns out John was right. Next slide. In 1979, Howell, who is the second on the, there we go, he took a group of Welsh miners to Alpalachia, where Helen Lewis and Pat Beaver arranged for them to meet miners, societies and organisations such as the Highlander Centre. That visit made a very profound impact on Howell and the group of miners. Writing about the visit in 1988, Howell noted that we are in the late 1980s in a broadly similar position to the US miners in the late 1970s. Coal was no longer a dominant industry in either country, and as Howell wrote, yet people and communities remain, and the desire for personal, family and community improvement through collective action remains in both countries. And it's these similarities, but also some of the differences, that has been at the heart of the comparative work conducted since. Next slide. In 2001, Pat Beaver brought a group of students from the Centre for Appalachian Studies to undertake research in the South Wales, and these visits have continued over the years. They've based themselves in Banwyn at the Dove Workshop, which is about 25 miles from Swansea, and they've used the holdings of the Miners Library, our branch library, which is in Dove, and also the university archives to undertake research. In September 2018, Howell and his wife Maya, who incidentally was one of the founders of the Dove Workshop in Banwin, were invited to Boone to help celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Centre for Appalachian Studies. But Howell decided it was time for a new generation to take on the role of chief collaborators. And so with his support, I was privileged to be able to visit Boone, and then again in March 2019 to speak at the International Mountain Studies Symposium and with Tom at the Appalachian Studies Association conference about our international links. During those visits, I was inspired by the many programs and community outreach activities that I witnessed. And Tom told me about his experiences of showing films made in the 70s and 80s and the communities in which they were made and the discussions that they sparked. In February this year, my dear friend and mentor, Howell Francis, died very suddenly. But in his memory, and with the experiences of Appalachia uppermost in my mind, last month we showed a film, next slide please, called A Waste of Our Time, Pictures of a Changing Valley, that Howell's adult education, next slide, there we go. Howell's adult education class in the South Wales Miners Library had made in 1983 about life in the Dilys Valley since the closure of the coal mines in the 1960s. Using it as our inspiration, my amazing team at the South Wales Miners Library worked with the amazing community to create a new film, Waste of Our Time, renewing pictures of a changing valley, which was premiered at the Oncloyne Welfare Hall, or the Palace of Culture, as Howell would refer to it, as part of the National Festival of Humanities called Being Human. It was a very emotional evening, but one which had Appalachia in my mind, and one in the spirit of the cultural exchange between Appalachia and South Wales that has been nurtured for over 40 years so far. Tom, over to you.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, I think, Sean, I appreciate you giving all that deep background and also from a perspective from the other side of the Atlantic. So I will try to be very brief. I think I've already introduced myself and made the connection to the Center for the Appalachian Studies at Appalachian State University. I do want to say that the exchange work that I've been involved in would not have been possible without not just the support of Sean and the South Wales Miners Library, but all those people who've gone before, who Sean mentioned. Helen Lewis, John Gaventa, Howell Francis, Pat Beaver, all of those were key. So they started the exchange, as you heard, as really a way for working miners to talk to each other, a labor-oriented exchange. And I think what's happened is, as the coal industry declined in both regions, the exchange pretty much was carried on by the academics, by Howell Francis and Pat Beaver in particular. And it kind of broadened out and became more of a cultural exchange and included students as well, and study abroad course that through the center we've been running off and on with the folks in Wales. So here's just a couple images from the Appalachian perspective of that historic exchange. Pat Beaver and one of the Welsh miners, Arfon Evans, in West Virginia in 1979. And of course, once again, have to tip my hat to the late Howell Francis, who was really such a powerful force in keeping this exchange going. And I'm really glad we're able to kind of pass it on to the next generation. So my part of the exchange was really under the umbrella of the After Coal Project, which is an exchange project highlighting individuals and organizations working to create a new future in the coal fields of the Appalachians and South Wales. And I think with After Coal, it was a further step of moving from a labor exchange into an academic exchange to using the power of arts and culture to get a little deeper into the communities. The centerpiece of the project was an hour-long documentary. Many of you all may have seen it. It's on the Canopy platform if you do want to look it up now. And there's a website that I'll put in the chat later on, aftercoal.com. But I wanted to talk more specifically about an important part of the exchange part of the project, which included public forums. Let me see if I can, yep. skip forward. So as part of filming the documentary, we ended up producing a series of public forums, both in Wales and Appalachia. You're seeing an image of one of the public forums that was actually held at Apple Shop in the Eastern Kentucky coalfields in 2014. And this forum was specifically talking about policy for economic regeneration. And in addition to Howell Francis and Meyer Francis, who Sean introduced us to, you can also see Robin Gabbard, who's working for the East Kentucky Foundation, and Evan Smith, who's working for the Appalachian Citizens Law Center. So there was a conversation about the role of kind of politics in encouraging transition. And some of those ideas that were brought forth by groups and individuals in that exchange are ideas like the Reclaim Act, or ideas that kind of have fed into the Reclaim Act, and portions of that Reclaim Act, if you're not familiar, have been built into the infrastructure plan that recently passed Congress here in the United States. In Wales, we did a similar project. This is an image of one of the workshops at the Dove workshop. Again, Pat Beaver and myself are presenting. You can also see Howell and Meyer Francis. And this, I think, may have been the idea where we were talking about sharing media and comparing past images of these coal mining regions with present images that Sean referred to. So all of this process is also described in the After Coal book that I think Christian referenced earlier on. And so I think the next step of the exchange was to do musical exchange as well, as part of using the power of culture. This is actually, we did bring Welsh musicians over to Eastern Kentucky and hosted performances. This is actually a performance from the other way. We brought some Appalachian musicians, Trevor McKenzie and Rebecca Jones, over to Wales, and they teamed up with Welsh musicians, Frank Hennessy and Yola Jones, to perform at the Hay Festival. We did a film screening and a panel discussion, and then a musical concert. So again, using the power of culture to continue the exchange. And I think the exchange continues to expand. This is actually an image of a 2015 visit to the Dove workshop with my Appalachian colleagues, Elizabeth Sanders, who at the time was general manager of WMMT Radio, and Tanya Turner, who at the time was a staff person on Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, a citizens group in Eastern Kentucky. And since that, the exchange has actually expanded even further. I've been working with some reporters of West Virginia Public Broadcasting, Glennis Board and Roxy Todd, to report on kind of the Welsh perspectives of the transition from coal, as well as the role of culture in kind of sustaining communities through transition. And as Sean said, I think we look forward to kind of moving this exchange into the next generation. Would love to see it kind of continue and sort of branch out. And I'm certainly glad to have the opportunity to present about this, and hope to talk to y'all more later. I'll put the website and contact info in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom and Sean. I am just putting in the chat another event.
You muted yourself, Catherine.
I'm sorry, folks. I was doing so well. So I've just added in the chat a link to an event that we're hosting here at Appalachian State University in the spring, a Global Mountain Dance Symposium. So take a look at that. Thank you, Tom and Sean, very much for that information about Wales. We are running about 10 minutes behind schedule, so I hope you folks can hang out with us at least to hear our last two presentations. Then we will switch over to a discussion breakout room format. But let's go ahead and turn our attention now to South Africa and some growing connections between Appalachia and the mountains in South Africa.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good evening.
No, it's, well,
Hello.
it's night, but it looks like it's afternoon to you all. Okay, I'm going to I did mention earlier when we joined that I'm here with Gray. So we've been social distancing. He doesn't have electricity at home. So I'll do the first part of the presentation and then he'll carry on. Let me just share the screen and give it a go. Just opening it up. Okay, so we are going to talk about, I need to minimize you because I can't see some of the words. Yeah, we are going to talk about celebrating Appalachia's international connections on Mountain Day. We're going to tell you a bit about the relationship we have with Upstate and discuss the Afro-Montane Research Unit, which does a bit of mountain studies, as you will see. Then we will explore potential future engagements. And then we have an exciting conference in 2022, South African Mountain Conferences, Southern African, but Gray will tell you more on that. So we have a designated research unit at the UFS Twatwa campus, which is called the Afro-Montane Research Unit. And it has the following objectives and goals. The first objective is to contribute intellectually and practically to the sustainable development discourse of the Maluti-Drakensberg as a unique social ecological system. Maluti-Drakensberg is the escarpment that our university is surrounded by, which covers the province of Free State as well as KwaZulu-Natal. Then the second objective is to place the poorly studied Southern African mountain systems, for example, those south of the Congo rainforest and Tanzania, in the continental and global mountain research, policy and governance area. The fourth objective of ARU is to facilitate, that's the third. The third is to facilitate the development of mountain research, community practice in Africa that will lead African mountain research from within Africa. I think we are all aware that a lot has been written about Africa from a perspective of difference, where someone outside of Africa comes into Africa and tells our stories. And we really have a goal to change that narrative, to tell our own stories, even about our own mountains. Of course, with collaboration, yes, but we don't want our researchers left behind. The fourth objective is to inform mountain hypotheses, theories, and impacts of global significance from an African perspective, and thus contribute to strengthening the role of the South in the global mountain research agenda. Now, with these four goals, we have with these four objectives, we have 7 goals, which we discuss next. First one is to drive mountain research and to contribute to research capacity in the Twatwa campus, which is the rural campus of the University of the Free State, so that the Twatwa campus will increasingly contribute to the global intellectual arena, to provide solution-oriented research to our immediate backyard, namely Twatwa, the Golden Gate, Highlands National Park, and the Rural Natal National Park, to facilitate research that encourages the sustainable development of the Maluti-Drakensberg as a unique social ecological system, and to become a knowledge generator and knowledge interchange for Southern African mountain research. Our next goal is to encourage blue skies research and to take the intellectual lead as an African-based leader in African mountain research. Then our final goal is to become a global player influencing mountain research theory, practice, and governance. From here on, Gray takes over.
Thanks, Norm. Evening, colleagues, and it's always wonderful to meet colleagues who are also fellow mountaineers or mountain research enthusiasts. We, just to add on to the previous slide about the Afro-Montane Research Unit, we really are looking at growing this research unit focus more on inter-trans, cross-disciplinary research and encourage research on these understudied Southern African mountains, specifically the Drakensberg Mountains in this regard. So what has been our relationship with Upstate? This has been a very fascinating and budding relationship, which has started with what we call the USDP, which is the University Staff Development Program, where we looked at having 10 colleagues undertake PhD studies with co-supervision from Alpalachia. Now, that has snowballed into a fantastic and phenomenal relationships where at the UFS, for example, we now have mountain-to-mountain studies, which is a master's program that is currently going through the registration processes with the Department of Geography. We also have what we're calling mountain weather stations to track weather changes, climate change, and really document how climate change is impacting specifically the Drakensberg Mountains. We're also looking at community development as a curriculum. We're working with a colleague there at Upstate, Julie, who has been quite helpful with very, very important inputs around that. So this is a budding relationship. There are other offshoots from this, but what is important, and I think for us, would be these that we've just mentioned, because they look at not only the ecological, but they also look at the social and the community underpinnings of mountains and how these are shaped. So what are the possible future collaborations we are looking at? We're looking at comparative mountain studies, applying for grants together. We're looking at what it means, the different understandings of mountains. What is the significance of mountains in Southern Africa, in Appalachia? What are the other social, cultural, ecological basis of all this? We're also looking at staff-student exchanges in future as well. We would really love to host colleagues from the Appalachian Studies Unit, especially given the interdisciplinary nature of it. We do have certain departments that can host. I heard people talking of Appalachian Studies literature. It would be fantastic to compare that with African literature, even with Basotho, for example, Basotho literature, and what that means, because these are communities that also live in the mountains. So there are those potential future collaborations, and would really love to explore them. So these are some images of our mountains. This is Norm hiking, the first one. That's Norm hiking. The types of mountains we have, I'm just comparing the mountains with the ones I saw in Appalachia, Grandfather Mountain. There were a lot of trees. Now, if you look at our mountains, they are not they don't have trees. You know, the highest peak we have in our mountains is about 11,500 feet, which is about 3,500 meters above sea level in terms of the altitude. So they're not very high mountains compared to the ones you have, but you know, by our standards, they are quite high, and they really do have an impact. If you check the picture on the right, it also shows some of the features that we also have in our mountains, a little stream, and how how that stream does affect the rest of the environment around it. So what's the next thing that's going to come up out of this? We are having an exciting Southern African Mountain Conference in 2022, where we're going to focus on Southern African mountains. And I'm also presenting it as an opportunity for Appalachian folks to come and share the scholarship and knowledge as an opportunity to benchmark. And there is the link. I know for now we have closed it, but I'm in the local organizing committee. If there should be folks that would really like to present and be part of this, please feel free to get in touch with me. This conference will be in March next year. I know there are currently travel bans, but or travel restrictions, but we're not really worried about that. We can also look at possibilities of virtual presentations. Thank you so much. That's it from the South African side.
All right, thank you very much, Gray and Nam. Really appreciate all of that information. And we are going to turn now to our final presentation for today. Ann Kingsolver and Sassy are going to talk about their edited collection, Global Mountain Regions, and the conference that that collection flowed from. So take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Catherine, very much for organizing this. It's really exciting to learn from everyone here today, and I'm looking forward to the discussion and learning from those who are not or on the call but not speaking yet. Dr. Sasi Kumar Balasundaram and I are going to go back and forth in this presentation. I'm speaking to you from the UK, the University of Kentucky Appalachian Center. I'm Ann Kingsolver. I direct the Appalachian Studies program here. I want to acknowledge Dr. Catherine Engel, who's on the call, who's the director of the Appalachian Center here. And I'd like to just start for a moment. We'll try to be quick, but I want to take a moment just to think of everyone in global mountain regions around the world navigating COVID and climate change. It's been a really rough year for people, and people have done some amazing things, organizing mutual aid organizations, working with children in creative ways. So I just want to just think for a moment about everybody getting through this year. Sasi Balasundaram and I have been partnering for about almost 20 years, getting ready for this today, working toward accessible, affordable, and equitable ways, equitable being one of the biggest challenges, to collaborate across global mountain regions. We keep learning from what works and doesn't work. We've done things individually, we've done things together over the years. I'm a cultural anthropologist, and I listen to how people make sense of global capitalism as much as one can possibly make sense of it, and transnational policies and effects on people's identities and livelihoods. So I met Sasi when I was a Fulbright scholar at the University of Peradeniya in Sri Lanka, and he was an undergraduate. And this was a course that I taught on globalization during a lull in the long civil war, the long ethnic war in Sri Lanka. You can see the upcountry of Sri Lanka, where Sasi's from. It's a tea growing region in the upper left corner of the slide here. And we, in the class, the students couldn't speak with each other because there are different language tracks and ethnic tracks in the university. But I asked that we have a class where the students were all together, and Sasi was in that class. And was trilingual and could speak to everybody in the class. And we, as a group, the students decided to do a project together and publish on youth unemployment. And we've learned over the years from comparing our home regions of Appalachia and the upcountry of Sri Lanka. Each of us, Sasi came to the US to do his PhD, and then came to the University of Kentucky Appalachian Center to do a postdoc. And so we've had chances to work together at the same and different universities. Each of us has worked to connect classrooms globally for almost 15 years. Again, working toward more equitable relationships. I've taught a Global Appalachia course for over a decade, and that class has partnered with classes or students in different countries, different mountain regions over the years, with sometimes working better than others. So we've partnered with students in Sri Lanka, in India, in Italy, the PRC, Ireland for a couple of years. We've been working with Dr. Chandana Mathur's students in Ireland, talking about water justice in Appalachia and India, where she works. And Sasi and I have published together on the challenges to equity and transnational partnerships. I really appreciated the last presentation because knowledge production should be centered in the mountain region where it is, instead of driven by the global north, driving the schedule of collaborations, the agenda of collaborations, the text of collaborations. That's one of the big problems. So Sasi is going to take up some of those challenges from here. Sasi, are you there?
Sorry, Anne, let me check and see if he's.
Am I here? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Kingsolver. Yeah, so we have been doing this kind of partnership for over 2 decades. So it has been, there has been, most of the partnership, we tried our best to create a equal partnership. But some of the, creating equal partnership has been the had been the goal, but also we felt so many challenges. Some of the challenges include, I think there are different kind of partnerships we have had. Some are formal, some are informal. Some of the lessons that we have learned through this collaboration, that sometimes the informal partnership has been a little more more sustainable, and also more equitable. Some of the formal partnership had been constrained by funding and state policies, because you have to go to the state bureaucracy. So those are some of the challenges. So some of the informal partnership that came out of the formal partnership still continue to flourish in different ways. And some of the, we are talking about our partnership, beginning of partnership like 20 years back. So 20 years technology has changed a lot. So we had a real, challenges of, in terms of, in terms of technology and broadband accessibility and availability of technology in other parts of the globe and communities. So those are some of the concern that, constraint that we had in the past. But I think things have improved since then. We have, as we know, most countries, have a better broadband, and the people have a phone, and the access to technology has changed. So I think creating a partnership in these days, is a much more little more equitable than the previous. But I think still we have to face those confront the inequities in terms of partnership, because in terms of in terms of resources and also time, time differences, especially for example, like if we have to create partnership, so it's always it's always US centered. So we had to work with the people on the other side of the world has to meet the time convenience for us. So that had been a very challenging in some part. For example, like for example, when we have to we have to meet here daytime, but it will be midnight in Pakistan. So some of those gender had been a challenge, because sometimes young women had to go to another place where they have one computer they can exchange. So there had been some challenges in terms of creating equal partnership, but I think we continue to improve that in every year and every time. And some of the lessons that we have through other partnership, I know there are a lot of communications and formal and informal partnership. We have found that through, even though that we have a partnership has a main goal or research interest or like teaching interest, but we always found that people across the world are more interested in learning about each other about their daily lives. So I think so the learning about everyday life has been the most interesting for a lot of people. I think we should increasingly focus on not just to focus on what our research as researchers, what we are interested in terms of research and in terms of building theories, but also in create more formal and informal connections to learn for people to learn about each other's lives and cultures and daily practices. So which will, I think, will lead to, will create a new spaces for people to talk and listen, share their everyday life experience to promote intercultural understanding and possibly in global peace. So I think that with, I'll give back to Dr. Kinsolver.
Thank you, Sasi. I just wanted to say quickly, Sasi and I organized a Global Mountain Regions Conference in 2012 that led to the 2018 collection, Global Mountain Regions. A number of the authors are on this call, so I hope that other people will be able to talk about this project. But quickly, that conference brought together artists and activists and interdisciplinary scholars from mountain regions in 16 different countries to compare experiences and strategies. And one of the things that we learned from that whole conversation was that artists really are most effective in communicating across mountain regions and all different languages. And another thing that we learned from our discussion was that when mountains themselves have agency and are equal partners in social movements, those social movements seem to be most successful in bringing about change. So for example, the mountains in partnership with the Dongria Khond in Odisha were able to fight off the Vedanta Corporation. And so we learned a lot about that in our comparative conversations. And I think Sasi wanted to make some other points about what we learned from that conference and the book project.
One of the main thing for the conference in our collection, as we planned and we executed, and we wanted to make, in the global political economy, mountains are always treated as the periphery. So we wanted to make sure in terms of we wanted to reframe it as the mountain as the center of the globe and not the periphery in terms of its because just for example, for the reason is, I'm just giving you some information, more than, as we all know, more than 3 billion people rely on mountains to provide fresh water to drink, grow food, generate hydropower and sustain industry. That is almost half of the global population live. Depends on the mountain region. So I thought we have to give mountains as an equal representation, but also place the mountain as the center of our analysis and also make the as a core of a global economy. But also almost 70 to 90% of the river flows from mountains, so which is key to so human survival. But also in terms of climate, I think a lot of you guys have exchanged that. Mountain regions covered by forest is the key to maintaining our ecosystem and also protecting the biodiversity. In addition, mountain regions are also enriched by the cultural diversity with the numerous indigenous nations and living, and also very in terms of religious diversity of mountains have the most sacred sites. So in terms of that, I think the mountains are very key to the global survival in terms of environment, but also in terms of cultural diversity. On the other hand, global mountain regions also has been devastated by social exclusion and economic exploitation, and also political marginalization by the capitalist world system. For example, if you think about global conflicts, almost 17 out of the 23 major conflicts are fought in the mountain region. So it's because of all these conflicts are because of the social exclusion, political marginalization, economic exploitation. So I think we should, so these communities are increasingly live at the margin. So I think, in terms of in terms of the resources that the mountains region provides to the world, in terms of the challenges that people face. And I think we thought the mountain region should be considered as an entry point to understand and analyze the global geopolitical economy and climate change and social justice in general. Back to King Solomon.
Thank you. And back to you, Catherine. And we look forward to talking with everybody in the next part of this.
All right. Thank you so much, Anne and Sasi, for a wonderful presentation. This does conclude the presentation portion of our time together today. So let's just give a big round of applause, a virtual round of applause to all those presenters. Thank you so much for taking time out of your days to do this part. Since we are running a little bit behind, I do want to respect your all's time and get you out of here at 2 o'clock if you are able to, 2 o'clock here in Boone time, to respect your time. So what I think we'll do is we'll go into breakout sessions for about 20 minutes. And if you are able to stay with us, that would be fabulous. Don't feel compelled to, but we'll spend about 20 minutes in randomly assigned breakout rooms. I'm going to form these into groups of hopefully about 7 people. And then we'll spend about 20 minutes there. I have some discussion questions to prompt your thinking. And then we'll get back together as a large group if anybody wants to hang out and talk more after that. So I'm going to go ahead and paste and send the discussion questions, 3 little simple discussion question prompts to get you started. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording. Thanks so much, everyone, for being willing to, for our presenters to be recorded, and we will, through the Appalachian Studies Association, make this recording available.